In this video, let's talk about something that is a struggle for a lot of people this time of year, and that is dealing with high water. This is definitely a challenging situation, but I'm going to give you some tips that can help you out with this. Now, high water can be caused by many different reasons, but the two that we're really most concerned with and things that are the most common is going to be high winds combined with the incoming tide, and then also rain runoff. Now, when it comes to high wind, if you have an onshore breeze, especially a really strong one for a couple of days, and then you get one of those new moons or those full moon cycles where you're going to have more water coming in than normal, combined with this onshore breeze, you can definitely have a lot more water than you expect. Now, what the fish do in this situation is going to be different by species. Now, because it's pushing seawater in, we don't really have to worry about salinity. It might dirty up the water a little bit, that might have a little effect on it, but really what we need to do is think about the species that we're after. Now, when it comes to redfish are notorious for loving to go up into areas that they're not able to get to normally. So things like shrimp and like crab, they're going to be up there in that marshland. And again, this is going to be places that these redfish aren't able to get up to, so it's new territory for them. The challenging part for anglers is going to be able to get up there to get to those fish. Now, sometimes it's a wadeable area, so you can wade to these fish, or you can use your kayak. If you've got a small skiff, maybe you can get up to them, but a lot of vessels aren't going to be able to get up in that grass to get to the fish. So my suggestion, if you're in this situation, is fish vertical structures, meaning stuff that the fish can't push back further. It could be seawalls, it could be docks, it could be any type of hard structure that is going to keep those fish from pushing back any further. So what they're going to do is they're going to go up and down with the tide instead of pushing back because they can't go any further, and it makes it easier for you to get to the fish. So when I'm on the water, I'm looking for areas that have a lot of vertical movement and not much horizontal movement, and that way the fish are pinned and staying in the main body of water and not able to go back further. Now let's talk about trout. Sea trout are going to be a little bit different. What they like to do is they like to associate with a certain water depth. Now before that high water comes in, they might associate, say it's 3 or 4 feet of water is what they're at. Well, they still might associate with that 3 or 4 feet. It's just going to be closer to the shoreline because we've got that higher water. So you might have to move a little bit closer. Now if you're fishing these marshlands and you're fishing these drains, same rules apply, but the only difference is you might get so much water in there it tops out that grass. So if you can find areas that still has that grass that creates that drain and allows for a little bit of blockage for those fish to go back up into those marshes, all the better. But you can still find trout on these vertical structures like we were talking about with redfish. So the docks and the seawalls, the rock piles, jetties, those are great places to look for them too. Now when it comes to flounder fishing, it's not really going to affect them too much. They're still going to be at the drains of these creek mouths. We just need to make sure and find the cleanest water. Flounder do like clean water. So if you're seeing a lot of dirty water in the area, you might want to change locations and make sure you're using a lure that's heavy enough to make it to the bottom. Where it might have been 6 or 8 feet, it might be 10 or 12 feet with some extra current. So it might take a little bit more weight than you're used to. When it comes to snook fishing, high water can be a challenge because they like hanging around mangroves. And much like redfish, whenever the mangroves get loaded with water, there's more places for those snook to get to, and it's harder for you to get to them. So places like docks and seawalls can be the better option. However, some of the best fishing that you can have is whenever that water starts to recede, you're going to get more water flow that's going to come out between those choke points in the islands and the mangrove tunnels. Snook will stack up in these places, and they become very easy to target this way. Now let's talk about the other reason why we're going to have high water, and that's going to be a lot of rain. Now in some areas, it really doesn't matter if there's rain in that area itself. You might get high water levels because it's raining further inside the country. If you're in one of those drainage areas, like you're in Upper Texas, if you're in Mobile Bay, if you're in Louisiana, you get a lot of that water that's going to come down. So it could be raining states away and all that water is going to come down. Now the difference between fishing high water because of winds pushing that seawater in and high waters because of the rain is the rain is going to bring a lot of fresh water in, and it's typically dirtier. So we need to put that in consideration. A couple of things that you can counteract this. If you're fishing in an area that has inlets and passes and you're getting a lot of that fresh water that's coming in, a lot of times these fish are going to push just outside those passes and along the surf line. So you can catch a lot of fish there. Your redfish are going to be out there. Your trout, your drum, flounder, they'll be out in the surf. So if you get a lot of high water because of that fresh rainwater, that's a good place to look. Now, if you're fishing in an area that's not near passes, you're fishing in a bay system or you're far away from a pass, then what we need to do is consider the difference between freshwater and saltwater. Fresh water is lighter and it's going to be dirtier. Salt water is denser and it's going to be cleaner. So what we need to do is, if we can find areas that have cleaner water, that means we're going to have more salinity most of the time, and those are the places that we're going to look. Now, sometimes we're not going to be able to find that because we have so much fresh water come in, and that's when you want to go to deeper water. Again, that salt water is going to be heavier than the fresh water, so deeper places. So ICWs, the intercoastal waterways, and also shipping channels are good places to look at them right on the edges. And we want to fish a little bit deeper to make sure we're getting down to that more saline alien, that salt cleaner water. So we're going to have to use something a little bit heavier to make sure we're down there at the bottom. Now, another little tip that I'll give you when it comes to fishing dirty water: fish get really close to structure whenever the water gets dirty. It gives them a little sense of security. So finding that hard structure and casting tight up against it is paramount when it comes to fishing this dirty water. So all those places we talked about earlier with that vertical structure, when you place your cast, make sure you're placing your cast right up against that structure, and make sure you're using something that's a weedless option so you don't get hung up. Now, what baits and lures to use really depends on what your high water situation is. If you're getting a lot of that seawater that's getting blown in, I find a lot of times they're on a finfish diet. Because it's blowing in that bait from the ocean, they're going to feed on finfish. Now, whenever there's freshwater runoff from the rain, everything gets pushed out of those marshes, and sometimes they'll get on a shrimp diet. So what I would do, find your area, find where the fish are, look for the most amount of bait as possible, and then mimic the bait that's there. If you're seeing a lot of jumping mullet or finger mullet, go with a finfish. But if you're seeing jumping shrimp along the surface, definitely try a shrimp. Don't look past those. So my recommendation, if you're wanting to use a shrimp lure, try our prawn or our prawn junior. Those are excellent. You can rig them a bunch of different ways. And if you're looking for something that's going to mimic bait fish, I like using a paddle tail, something like our 2.0, which is our 3.5 inch, and our mulligan, which is our 4 inch. Those work great in those situations. And what's really good about those is you can cover a lot of water and figure out where these fish are going to be. Now, I know fishing high water can be challenging, especially if that water changes colors, gets a little bit more turbid. You go to your places that you've been doing well, all of a sudden it's a dead zone, there's nothing there. It's because these fish have gone and we need to go look for them. So think about those areas that we talked about with the vertical structure and the shipping channels, depending on your situation, and I bet you'll be able to find more fish. So if there's any tips that you'd like to share, or if you've got any questions or comments, go ahead and put those down below and I'll try to answer them as soon as I can. As always, I really do appreciate you watching. Now have a great one. Go get them. Bye.